Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Hey, what is up, gang? Welcome to a special playoff preview for The Lock Shop. Huss in with you, Dusty back mid-next week. Although you can look for him behind the Jays bench. I think he said he's going to be about 5 rows up in San Diego this weekend in the afternoon game, having some fun with the kids down at Disney and whatnot. But we've got a very special guest to get us ready for all of the series. Our pal, Andy MacNeil. You can follow him on Twitter at Digital Gambler. Andy, thanks so much for doing this, dude. I could not get into the playoffs without breaking down these series and hearing what the big brain in Northern Alberta has for us. So thanks for doing this. I'm really looking forward to the next 45 or so.
Well, I appreciate it, but give me a break. Come on, right?
Hey, we always have good times with you, and you got a lot of great analysis. I know you've been running the numbers. We'll have some great thoughts. Listen, I want to shout out everyone that's listening on the Edmonton Sports Talk stream. Stick around. We will have the keyword for you a little bit later on in the program. And, of course, there's Joel and the rest of the gang in the chat. What's going on, everyone? Happy Friday. We got the playoff matchup set, and we are ready to go. Hey, listen, just before we dive into it, of course, shout out to our friends at Coolbet Canada. All the lines are up for the playoffs. The series are set. And I just got a tweet from Jake earlier this morning. You know, and I'm not a big college basketball bettor, but you know I was going to take advantage of that 20% win boost they were throwing up for each round. Well, the fellas have brought it back for the playoffs. Weekend win boost. Basically, 120% win boost every weekend during the NHL and NBA playoffs. You can use it however you want, not limited to one sport or the other. And, of course, the playoffs get going on Saturday. So be sure to pay attention. Promotions tab. Use that 20% wisely, and hopefully you pick a winner. Andy, listen, before we kind of dive into these series, how about last night? I mean, I know the Oiler fans in the chat were sitting there expecting the Vegas Golden Knights.
I was too.
Vegas loses to Anaheim last night, and then LA almost blew it against Chicago. Kind of a bizarre late slate for game 82 where we didn't even know these matchups until, well, basically late last night.
Yeah, and it's a little frustrating from my perspective, right? Like you'd like a couple of days of runway to get into this and, you know, not have to cram so much for a show like this, or, you know, to get predictions out and all that. But I don't know what the NHL's problem is, man. If they wanted to start the playoffs on April 20th, then the regular season should not be ending on April 18th. It's just nonsense. But it also makes it hard for the casual fan, you know, like to not know who the playoff matchups are up until, you know, 11 p.m. Mountain Time, right? Like it's just insane. So Oilers fans have to be pretty happy about how things worked out, though. I mean, you know, I think the LA Kings are a tough out in their own right, but Vegas, there's so much uncertainty there. You don't know what you're going to get in the first round with this Golden Knights team. I think, you know, Winnipeg found it out last year. I thought Winnipeg would look more dominant than any team I've ever seen in a game one of a Stanley Cup playoff series. And then things obviously flipped quite a bit. But this Vegas team, I think if you can avoid them, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Well, listen, I mean, now they're going into the Central. I mean, I tweeted out last night, this seems like, to use a soccer term, like the group of death. I mean, this Colorado-Winnipeg series is, I mean, there's going to be one really good team going home. And now for the Dallas Stars to be rewarded for winning the West by getting the Vegas Golden Knights in round number one, it's, I guarantee you, if they were at a format where you got to pick your opponent, I don't think Dallas is picking Vegas.
No, yeah, the Stars fans aren't chanting "We want Vegas." They're not stupid like Toronto, but yeah, I mean, you know, Vegas has had a lot of success. They've obviously they've you know, beat Dallas in the conference finals last year, and the way that series worked out was pretty interesting. I mean, they took a 3-0 series lead, then Dallas won 2 straight games, and then they just got absolutely blown out on home ice in Game 6, 6-0. So it was a pretty interesting series. But I think, you know, the most interesting thing about this one is just how closely it's been matched all the time. 7 out of the last 12 meetings, including playoffs, have gone to overtime or a shootout. And I think that's, going to be something that we probably see in this series a couple of times. But if you're looking to bet that, I think it's probably going to be shaded a little bit that way by odds makers, because they know that that everybody expects this one to go to a draw at least 1 or 2 times in a 7-game series.
Yeah, I have a feeling that those overtime props will be hit, and they'll probably be cashing too. This line came out, and I was very interested. Let me ask you this before: what did you think the line would be when Vegas was going? Like, how big of a favorite? You'd assume Dallas would be the favorite, but
yeah.
How big or short of a favorite were you expecting to get it? I'm seeing right now, Coolbet's got it at -132 for Dallas and +110 for the Golden Knights.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I've got it, -130 in favor of the Dallas Stars. They've got about a 57% chance of winning the series according to my forecast, and I think I'm not surprised to see that they're right around where I thought they'd be. I didn't think they'd be a bigger favorite. Sometimes you kind of get a sense that maybe they will be just based on public perception, but if I think people are pretty willing to bet on Vegas as an underdog in this situation. So I don't think sportsbooks are necessarily, wanting to give them the most generous odds on this one. So it makes sense why they would shade this one closer to what I think is a true price, -130 in favor of Dallas. As opposed to a series like the Preds and the Canucks, where I think it should be -130 in favor of the Canucks, but it's, +130. That's what you're seeing at sportsbooks. This one's shaded more closer to the favorite side. And I think the fact that people are going to line up to bet Vegas as an underdog, just the casual bettors, etc., I think that plays into it. So I think, like you said, the Stars, they absolutely deserve to be a favorite. They've got the edge in goal. But they've had the edge in goal in past years, right? Ottinger has been, perceived to be the more elite goaltender, maybe the most, the best goaltender outside of Connor Hellebuck in the Western Conference. So, or I guess Thatcher Demko needs to be in that conversation as well. But one of the top 3 goaltenders in the Western Conference, but that hasn't gotten the Stars past the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty here. Mark Stone coming back, you don't know what that's going to change the kind of complexion of the team. I know they have some other lineup questions. I'm not really sure what the status of Alex Pietrangelo is right now. He's been out for a little while, kind of uncertain.
That would be a massive injury. I mean, we can talk about Stone all we want. If Pietrangelo's not there for any games, that completely changes the complexity of a blue line that has been a real strength of Vegas, and certainly was last year, going all the way to win the Cup.
So if he missed a couple of games, that would definitely swing things a little bit in Dallas, or a lot in Dallas's direction as far as on a game to game basis. But you talk about the series price, I don't know that it would swing it that much that I would be like, oh, I'm going to line up to bet the Stars here at -130. It's just one of those matchups that I look at it and I'm like, it's probably they've done a good job with the odds here, and I don't think I'd feel like I had an advantage or anything betting on Dallas or Vegas here.
You mentioned Ottinger, and Ottinger at times this year, actually, if you dug into his numbers, I mean, wasn't playing at the level he'd had before. He was very low in the high danger saves when on chances against. But as we go into this series, I've got major questions about Vegas's goaltending. Aiden Hill did not look good last night. He's been in and out of the lineup. Logan Thompson, who was the guy all last year that didn't play in the playoffs, has been playing a little bit more. Just from a Vegas perspective, not even worrying about the bets or not, how concerning are you from a Vegas perspective about what they're going to get in net? Because as we all know, if your goalies don't come to play, it's pretty tough to win, especially against a good team like the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern. I think you look at Dallas, Ottinger, he has the higher ceiling, right? But they've, overall, I think Hill and Thompson had decent seasons. I don't think they were, bad by any means. They were both bad for stretches, but I think, there's scenarios where they can, keep it close enough and go save for save with Ottinger and whatnot. So I'm not as worried about it. I don't think. I think I'm more concerned with how Vegas plays as a whole. How healthy they are, etc. Like we just talked about. I think when it comes to goaltending, it's like, and I gotta credit my friend Cole Anderson with this one. He talks about it all the time, how like with goalies, it's like you're shuffling a deck, and then each card in the deck has a performance in it. And, some are bad, some are average, some are above average. And every game, it's like you shuffle the deck and you pull out a card, and that's what you get from your goalie. And, for a team like Vegas, maybe they get a great performance out of Hill in game one. Maybe, that carries over to a solid enough performance in game two, right? Like, they don't have to be great, I don't think, right? They just have to be good enough, and their saves and their the goals against kind of have to kind of be timely, right? It's going to come down to that, and I think Vegas could definitely match Dallas in the goaltending department if Ottinger shows more of what we saw in the first half of the season than the last few weeks.
Andy MacNeil's with us on the Lock Shop, a little special playoff edition. Make sure to give him a follow on X at Digital Gambler and check out all of his content. Now, staying in the group of death, as I'm calling it, we've got the Vegas Golden Knights series. Then we got Winnipeg and Colorado. And what's interesting, it is the exact same line here. Plus 110 for the Jets, minus 132 for the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I will point to the Jets winning the Jennings Trophy, having the best defense in the league, having the Vezina Trophy goaltender, having a very deep team, 1-12 forward-wise, but certainly not that high-end power of the top line of Colorado, and certainly not with the playoff pedigree of the Avalanche. When you look at what happened when these teams played against each other this year, the Jets swept them, 17 goals for, 4 against, highlighted by that 7-0 beatdown in Denver last week. Yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of confidence with the Jets considering what they've done so far, but I think we all know that this playoff Avalanche team will be better than the one in the regular season. Andy, when you look at this series, how close is it right now? And what do you think of the Jets' chances to maybe get the win in what betting-wise is an upset, albeit they've got home ice advantage and did finish higher than the Avs in the standings?
Yeah, and it's my only bet for the Western Conference Series prices. The Winnipeg Jets, I grabbed them, and I like them at plus 110 or better, and plus 102 is where I think it should be. So it's a virtual coin flip. I've got them winning roughly 49.5% of the time. And I mean, I think you pointed to those areas of strength for Winnipeg and whatnot, but like look at Colorado over the last 6 weeks on defense. They're a bottom 10 team in goals against per 60 minutes. I don't think you can discount that. They don't have a goaltender that can go save for save with Hellebuck. They've got a lot more name brand value on their roster, etc. They've got superstar talent in McKinnon and McCarr. But yeah, I think this is the closest matchup of the first round. And obviously goaltending has a big thing, is a big reason why. But I think, there were stretches throughout the season, and yeah, the Avs have been pretty dangerous offensively all year long, but there were stretches throughout this season where they were allowing as many goals as they were scoring. So, I think that's not a great recipe for success going into a series against a team that's beaten you 3 times this season, decisively each time, really decisively, like you said in the last meeting. And I don't want to put too much stock into the regular season. Like you said, it's teams can, like the Avalanche, can get good overnight and clean up a lot of those mistakes. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty hard for this Winnipeg Jets team. But I got to go back to the regular season for a minute, because I got to ask you: is Rick Bowness? Does he have is he going to win the Jack Adams? Because I got Bowness futures. I got him at 16-1 before the start of the season, and he's my guy, right?
Well, he should listen. The job that Bones did with the Jets, listen, it speaks for itself. I mean, we were talking like the Jets. We cashed this ticket a long time ago, but I mean, the Jets' points for the season was 94.5.
I had them at like 89.5. I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs.
Okay, so you took the under on that one and had it. Like, they have exceeded everybody's expectations. And let's face it, that usually is what the voters vote on. It's not necessarily the guy that wins the President's Trophy.
Yeah.
It's who did everyone think was going to stink that actually ended up having a great season. And if you'd asked me this a month ago, I would have said, that bonus future is probably going to come up a little short. But the way the team finished the year, the fact that they finished 4th overall, 2nd in the West, I mean, listen, I think he's going to get some serious consideration. And you know what's funny? We were talking, just as an aside, we were talking about the GM of the Year award. And I know that's not something I think often we'll see posted at books, but the year that Kevin Cheveldayoff's had, dating back to the trade deadline last year, the Dubois trade, signing Hellebuck and Scheifele out of nowhere, the ads that they've done and the season that they've had, he'll certainly get consideration. But I found out that that's voted on after the second round of the playoffs. It's not after the regular season. It's not after the playoffs. It's right in the middle. So you inevitably probably get 3 of the 4 GMs that are still standing going into the conference finals. So
yeah,
I guess we will see on that. But Bones has done an unbelievable job. The Jennings Trophy is kind of the final feather in the hat, and not just the goaltending, but the defensive system that he put in that has been the foundation of Winnipeg's success so far this year. And again, this line has not moved. You can still get the Jets at plus 110 right now in that series against Colorado. One thing that the numbers say, they do expect this one to be a long series. If you think it's going to go to 7, you can get plus 190, but under 6.5 is, under 5.5 plus 150. I have a hard time thinking that this is going to be a short series. And to be honest, that Central Division, the advantage in the second round, regardless of who wins, might be the team that takes care of business sooner as opposed to later, because I think both of these series are going to be absolute wars. Andy, let's move over to the Pacific. We found out both of these matchups quite late yesterday, and as we talked right off the top, I think most Oiler fans were expecting the Stanley Cup champs, but it's a familiar playoff foe in the Los Angeles Kings. You knew the Oilers would be a favorite. Minus 222 we're looking at. Kings looking at plus 180. The Oilers, everyone will be on the Oilers, but how close of a series do you think this is going to be? And how much of a bullet did they dodge getting the Kings in your mind as opposed to getting Las Vegas?
Oh, I think, yeah, it's a big bullet dodge. I mean, look, Dallas and Edmonton, I think are comparable teams ratings wise, right? So, you look Dallas a minus 130 favorite in the first round, and the Oilers a minus 190 favorite. So there's a big difference there. Edmonton would be down in the minus 130, minus 140, maybe minus 150 range at the most against Vegas, right? So they definitely dodged a bullet, but. And I think the Oilers are going to win. I don't think that's not a surprise. I've got them winning about 64.5% of the time, roughly. But that's I think out of all the matchups, I think I feel the least confident about this one. LA, I think people have to remember that these matchups have not been easy. LA had a chance to put Edmonton, push them to the brink of elimination last year. They were up 3-0 in the first period in game number 4. They already had a 2-1 series lead. They've jumped out to early series lead in the last 2 years. I don't think they're intimidated by the Oilers. I think they know they're outmatched overall, but I think, this is a team that can, frustrate Edmonton and maybe turn this series on its head a little bit. I just don't, I just want a bigger price. I want bigger odds if I'm going to get behind LA. I'd probably look at this one from a game by game perspective and kind of look at it like that. I mean, that Edmonton has things that Los Angeles doesn't, right? Like Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, even Zach Hyman. But I think, you look at LA, they've got things that Edmonton doesn't have, like an Anze Kopitar and Philip Deneau and these defensive specialists, right? And I think their forward line specifically are insanely kind of I don't know if you'd say balanced. I think some of their moves are kind of idiotic the way they've been, with their player usage and whatnot. Like their fourth line right now is Quentin Byfield, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and I want to say Turcotte, but maybe I'm wrong there. But I know it's Byfield and Dubois down playing in the lower in the lineup. And I'm not the coach, but I just think being able to have that kind of spread throughout your lineup is something that if they can manage to keep McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman a little bit quieter than usual, maybe that kind of balanced forward lineup really plays out well for them. I think Edmonton's gonna get the job done here, but would not be surprised in the least to see LA turn this one on its head.
You mentioned the Kings lines, And I was stunned, to be honest, with the season that Byfield had, that he's
Oh
on the
yeah.
fourth line. Not surprised that PLD's ended up there.
No.
And of course, we've got quite the history with our old pal PLD. I will say this, though, as disappointing of a season that he's been, and it's been an absolute mess, really, from the get-go. He is a guy that when he is engaged, it was Jamie Noodles McLennan said on the show today, you know, when he decides to put on his equipment and actually show up to work, he can be a guy that makes something happen. Like, he can completely change the narrative for the decision that they made with a big series right now. I would suggest that there's a ton of pressure on him to actually do that. And when you look back at the Jets Vegas series last year, game one that the Jets looked so good, he was the best player on the ice, and it wasn't even close. He completely was invisible games 3, 4, and 5 down the rest of the way, but he does have that club in his bag. And if they can get impactful performances from those guys playing lower in the lineup and hold their own elsewhere, it could be a more interesting series than I think a lot of people expect. The one that I'm really interested in your perspective on is one that I've been thinking about for a long time, and it is Vancouver and Nashville. And, you know, the Canucks, much like the Jets, have had a great season, but you never really saw their cup odds be in the same stratosphere as some of the perceived top teams. And then you had the Predators, who I think we all thought were headed for the draft lottery, and then put together a Hamburglar-style run of 19 straight without a regulation loss, and now they're in right now. Like, when I look at Nashville, I do see a team that has the makings of a very dangerous playoff team. A great goaltender in Saros, a legit Norris-level defenseman that can play 30 a night in the playoffs like Roman Josi. And I mean, a center in Ryan O'Reilly that, you know, might not be at a McDavid or McKinnon level offensively, but is as good as you'll find two ways. And Philip Forsberg's having a career year. Like, how much do you respect the Nashville Predators as a playoff team? And how much of a threat do you think they are to an upset of the Canucks in the first round?
Yeah, I give the Predators a lot of respect, and I think I was bullish enough on them throughout the season. I was right from game one when it was announced that Vasilevsky was out. I already liked the Predators, and I had a bit of Predators against Tampa Bay in game one on the opening night of the regular season, and then piled a bunch more on Nashville once it was announced that Vasilevsky was going to be shut down for a few months. And of course they lost that game and whatever, but yeah, no, I've picked my spots well on the Preds throughout the season and was able to make some money on them down the stretch. And like you said, I think you got to give their scoring prowess some respect here. Only the Toronto Maple Leafs scored more goals per 60 minutes than the Nashville Predators did in the last 2 months of the regular season. And you look at their top line, like you said, Philip Forsberg, 48 goals, good for 6th in the NHL. Nyquist, career year, 75 points, right? So, and then they've got Roman Josi on the back end with his great season. I think it's the second best season ever from a total points, raw points perspective. So he's playing at the top of his game, and yeah, I mean, Vancouver, they're the better team. They finished 6th on offense this season. They were, I think, a lot better on defense than people expected them to be. And that's not all because of Thatcher Demko. I mean, I'm talking about, expected goals per 60. They ranked among the top 5 teams this season. So it's not, they're a good team. And I don't think there's as much, I don't think we should be talking about PDO as much as maybe some other people will say we should be. But yeah, I don't think they're as good as the odds suggest. I'm not sure it's enough. For me, it's not enough to bet on Nashville because I think Vancouver should be a -130 favorite. Nashville's a +130 favorite. That means I'm pretty neutral on it. But yeah, some of the other models, I know Money Puck, Don Lucian of The Athletic, they've got Vancouver winning around 60+% of the time. I'm closer to the 55-56% range. So yeah, they should be a favorite. But if this series line gets any higher, so it's at +130 now, if it gets up to +140, I'd probably make a small bet on the Preds to win the series. But yeah, I'll be looking for my spots here. The perception can change pretty quick too. If a team wins a game and Vancouver gets has their back against the wall a little bit, the odds on Nashville just from a game by game perspective, might jump a bunch, right? It might get really big. So you see it a lot when teams are in that kind of I don't want to say must win, but got to win to get back even in a series and things like that. Things shift a lot. Looking back at last season, I remember in the first round between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Islanders, Carolina was a pretty big favorite on home ice, and then they switched to being an underdog on the road in New York. And it was just it really didn't make sense in terms of, what home ice was worth and what you would expect and whatnot. So you do see those situations. So I think I'd rather wait and see how this one plays out. But I do want to look into this and maybe try to find a Predators player to lead this series in scoring, because I think, like I said, Nashville's scoring prowess is pretty underrated here.
Well, you know what I mean? Part of me wants to jump on. I still think Vancouver's a better team and wins.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of with you. And I know, listen, a lot of people in the chat yesterday were looking at Nashville, liking their chances, what they've done. They're playing well coming into the playoffs and jumping on that plus 125. But I really do think that I could see the Canucks losing game one at home. And at that point, that number completely flips. And I think that might be a good time to get in on Vancouver. The thing about Vancouver, and again, this is just, again, maybe not necessarily a betting conversation, but we don't really know what this team is about come playoff time. I mean, that is the one thing. They've had this great season and they've been up at the top the entire year, but we all know the playoffs are a different beast. And this is a team that hasn't been there for a while. And to be honest, I think they're one of the most intriguing teams, Andy, just from a fan perspective, as to what they'll do now that they've won the Pacific Division and it's time to raise your level of play going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like outside of maybe Washington, I guess, and New York, the Islanders, they're maybe the two teams. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if a Nashville won the Stanley Cup. Like, that's how wide open I think it is this year. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are some, elite teams like the Stars and whatnot, and the Oilers and what we have in the Eastern Conference, but I think there are some really good teams, at least 12 really good teams in the 2024 playoffs. And I think if you you look at the Canucks, they could easily go on a run here. They've got all the tools as far as having the offensive star power, having the star power on defense, having the star power in goal. They definitely they have a at least somewhat of a blueprint of a Stanley Cup champion. So I would not be surprised whatsoever to see Vancouver go on a run. They are very intriguing for that matter.
Hey, listen, just before we get to the East, let's fire out the key word today for the Edmonton Sports Talk win a trip to Vegas contest. 2 nonstop flights, 3 nights accommodation, tickets to a Cirque show presented by Fly YEG and the LVCVA with nonstop flights to over 50 destinations. Your sports trip starts with a nonstop flight from YEG. Here you go.
I thought you were going to say Calgary, man, because I didn't even know if YEG was doing any nonstop flights right now. This place sucks.
They're firing it out. Here we go. So Friday, today's keyword is hold. HOLD, hold. Text that to 780-218-9999, and Zach Tickamanawanek will call the qualifier at the top of the hour after we're done. So make sure to stay by your phone to get that call. Again, today's keyword is hold. Text it now, 780-218-9999. Over to the East, and it was funny watching. Like, do you think Boston tanked their last 2 games? I mean, if you watch them play, they had 16 shots against the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, that was bad.
Shut out. 3 shots in the first period at home against Ottawa. I think they went to 8 in the second period and then decided, maybe we should play. Outshot them 23-2 in the third, but it wasn't enough. But they get the Leafs. And we know the long history of the Leafs, particularly against the Boston Bruins. Like, do you think Boston wanted? Yeah, there we go. For those of you listening, there a Leaf jersey was just desecrated in Andy's lap. Listen, the Bruins are a slight favorite. I mean, we're looking at minus 125 for them, plus 105 for the Leafs. They have owned this team this year and in the past. although they are a little different. We know there's no Bergeron. Do you think that Boston wanted Toronto, and should they have, considering the way you feel about this matchup?
I did. I wanted Toronto. I mean, I'm a Bruins fan, not as big of a Bruins fan as I used to be, but still a fan nonetheless. And talking about those last two regular season games, my dad is a big Bruins fan, and he was absolutely disgusted. He was fuming. So, but yeah, I think I don't know. It's hard to say, right, as far as who wanted to face who and whatnot. But I think Boston's got to feel good about this matchup, and Toronto probably has to feel like they're a little bit, maybe feeling a little bit hopeless given what they've, how they've looked against Boston this season. I know the first couple of matchups went to overtime, but those last two meetings, they're pretty one-sided for the Bruins and, the historical aspect and all that stuff. But I actually took Boston on the series spread at -1.5 games. So I'm hoping they can win this one in 6 or fewer. I've got them winning roughly 57% of the time. So I think they should be a little bit of a bigger favorite than they are right now. But yeah, I look at this series and it's like, yeah, Toronto's been really good, especially lately on offense. And they're better probably than Boston on offense, but the gap isn't that big that Boston can't keep up with them in a 7-game series and can't, outscore them in, the amount of games needed, especially if the gap between the defense of these two teams is as big as I think it is. Because you look at, Boston's blue line just on paper. I mean, Toronto's going to have it Lyubushkin on the top pairing with Brody, like against Boston's blue line, and Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. Each of the last 2 seasons, those goaltenders finished among the top 10 goaltenders in goals saved above expected. So I think Boston just has a big edge on the, without the puck. And I don't think that's been I think people are kind of dismissing the Bruins because they, maybe struggled a little bit down the stretch, but they had one of the toughest schedules of any team in the second half of the season. Over 65% of their 30 odd games that they played, since the All-Star break actually were against playoff teams, whereas Toronto was, maybe half and half. So I think it's only natural that Boston's numbers dipped a bit and whatnot, but between the goaltending, the defense, and the fact that Toronto hasn't been that much better on offense, I think Boston with home ice is a deserving favorite for sure.
People are loving the shade to the Leafs in the chat right now. That's one way. In wrestling, we call that a cheap pop.
Yeah,
and we were getting it right now. Dell says, unfortunately, the Leafs are toast again. So let's get to it. Battle of Florida. The Panthers, and this, I mean, just from paying attention to the Coolbet lines, this is the line that has moved the most.
Oh yeah.
It had been, I think it opened at around -170 or so for Florida. Quickly was at -182. I've just pulled it up right now. Florida now -200. Listen, the Panthers have had a great season, and you can certainly make an argument that they are the top to bottom deepest team and maybe the best team, even though the Rangers won the President's Trophy. But are people sleeping on the Lightning? This is a team that is now healthy. They got Vasilevsky back. There's a lot of cup rings in that dressing room. When you crunch the numbers and look at this series, is it Florida by a lot, or is this a tight one that could go either way?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think Florida wins about 65% of the time. So I do agree with that. They should have been a bigger favorite than -170-ish, like -185 is where I think they should be. I didn't think there was enough value there to justify laying -170 on the Panthers. I really liked Florida all season long. And I thought, right up until the last couple of months, they were, arguably the most consistent team. You look like they're just a steady line. Every stat just kind of the same all season long. But then obviously they started to dip a bit, and I don't think their offensive ceiling is nearly as high as it's been in other seasons. And obviously they've sacrificed some of that for defense, and it's worked out because they've been arguably the best defensive team this season, one of the stingiest teams. But I think, the Lightning scare me a little bit just simply because of, obviously the Vasilevsky factor, but they finished among the top 6 teams on offense this season, right? So they've been better on offense than Florida has been this season. So if Florida's offense goes a little bit cold, that could kind of open things up here. And I don't think Tampa Bay is going to be intimidated by this matchup whatsoever. They've got a lot of weapons. Florida's a lot deeper, like I said, but yeah, the Panthers finished outside the top 10 on offense this year. And there were stretches where they were, in the 20th position kind of range in terms of their goals per 60 at even strength and whatnot. So yeah, I think Florida is a very deserving big favorite, but I wouldn't, for my money, I'd probably stay clear of this one, given the prices, and maybe look for some situations to get involved once it gets underway. But yeah, like I said, Tampa Bay kind of scares me a little bit. They just because of Florida's commitment to defense. If Bob falters a little bit and their offense doesn't get clicking right away, could start to go the other way really quick, right?
Well, and you know what? We've seen these teams before. They know each other so well. They played in each other's buildings. Yeah. They played in the playoffs before. It wouldn't surprise me if, much like we were talking with the Vancouver-Nashville series, for Tampa to steal one in game number 1, and then you'll see a major flip in the odds, and that might be a great opportunity to get in for Florida. I just love to see this one go the distance. I mean, a game 7 between these teams would be phenomenal.
To that point, and something I want to say, like, as far as the series probabilities go, like, I've kind of like worked it out, and you've got to be about an 80% favorite. So like New York Rangers, Carolina Hurricanes kind of range there where they're at now, up around the minus 400 kind of area. Like, that's where you've got to be in order to like look at a series and be like, yeah, that one should be over in 5 games. So like, even these series where a team is like Florida is a minus 200 favorite, like, it's still likely to go 6 games at least, right? Like, kind of thing. It's still not that big of a gap where we can say like, oh yeah, like this will be over in 4 or 5 games. Like, no, like this, I think this Panthers Lightning series will go longer than people think. And I think even the odds suggest that. So I think, 6 games is a pretty good prediction for this one, but yeah, 7 games would be awesome.
Yeah. Sign me up for that. I mean, listen, I wanted to really spend most of our time, which we have, on the 6 series that are somewhat interesting and seemingly up for grabs. I mean, like the Washington Capitals, by the numbers, one of the worst playoff teams in decades.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Islanders, with I think like a minus 18 goal differential, not much better. Are both of these series destined to be over quick? I mean, is there any value on these massive underdogs with the big numbers? Or is this, I mean, you won't see me betting a team at minus 400 or greater in series like that in the playoffs, because we've seen it go the other way. And again, we have seen big upsets. I'm just not sure that either of these teams have what it takes to even make a series. And it certainly seems like the Rangers and Carolina Hurricanes are just in an entire different weight class than the 2 teams they're getting in round 1.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't hear any complaining from the Rangers, given that they get the matchup against this minus 37 goal differential that the Capitals have. But yeah, I mean, I always like, it's one of those things where it's like, you always feel a little bit dumb picking the favorite from any kind of betting perspective. I actually bet on New York to win the series on the minus 2.5 game series spread at around, this was a few days ago when this one first got announced. So the odds were around plus 145. I thought they should be around plus 120. So what I do is I run my simulation that kind of predicts, based on the game probabilities, the odds that I'm predicting for each game, how often the team's going to win in 4, 5, 6, or 7 games. And I found that, New York would win in 4 or 5 games about, roughly kind of 46% of the time. Right. So I was happy to take that price, but not sure what the odds are at now. Do you have that one?
It's come down a little bit. So Rangers minus 2.5. So that's to win in 4 or 5, plus 115 right now.
Okay, yeah. So that one's gone at a range for me. I think that's pretty fair. And the other, like I looked at that and I considered taking the Rangers in exactly 5 games at 3-1 odds. That one moved too, pretty soon after. Naturally, right? People want to bet this Rangers team to get this one over pretty quickly. But I don't have a lot of conviction in it. It was just simply a numbers thing. It was like, I think it should be here. I'm going to take it down to, where it should be. But like, it's not like I woke up and thought like, oh yeah, the Rangers are going to smash them. It would not surprise me in the least to see the Rangers fumble the bag here and and screw this up. I mean, they should win the series in 4 or 5 games. But it's the Rangers, right? And I think Shesterkin should save them, but Lindgren's been good, and he's upset teams down the stretch. And the Caps have been, they've got this wide range of outcomes where you can see them get their, get just absolutely blown out one night, and then come back and play this really stingy defensive effort the next night. And I don't think a best of 7 is a big enough sample to really determine who the better hockey team is. I think it's totally possible that the worst team in a series can win, and it happens a lot. So yeah, I don't know. I think if you get the right price, there's maybe some good looks on the Rangers, but yeah, like why, there's no need to reach on this one. It's, we could see a situation where the odds on the Capitals just to win a game get totally out of control, right? Later on in the series. So we'll see what happens. But as far as Carolina and New York goes, I don't think this Islanders team is going to win a Stanley Cup in like a million years. They're just wasting everybody's time, just like the Caps. Yeah, same thing. I mean, it's, I think the Hurricanes win the series about 77% of the time, which is about minus 350. So kind of right where they are at in the sports betting market. But the Islanders, I don't know. It sounds like they might start Varlamov in the first game,
which is wild.
Yeah, which is wild given the pedigree that Sorokin has. Varlamov's a good goaltender, of course, but yeah, it's wild. And I don't know, man. This Islanders team, they're such a hard team for me to figure out. I've lost so much money betting on New York specifically, more than any other team in the last, ever since the Barry Trotz hire. Like since that season, right up until now, they have been a tough team for me to figure out. And
they've been on the suspended list for a while.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I can say that when I ran my simulation and I got back Carolina minus 350, I was like, good, I don't have to bet on this series. It's pretty much where the sports book says it is. And I'm just going to kind of forget about it because I don't even know if I want to watch this one, man. Like it's going to be brutal.
Yeah, listen, it's when we're power ranking all of this series, this one kind of near the bottom. I will say this, and this is interesting. We've kind of been paying attention at the future numbers, and obviously it's particularly a cool bet with the amount of cool bettors here. There's always a lot of steam on the Oilers, although the Oilers have been a pretty public team all year long. Edmonton and Carolina were both the shortest number at 7-1 to win the Cup earlier. I see the Oilers actually now have gone to 750, and the Canes have gone down to plus 670 as the favorite right now over at Coolbet. Let me just ask you this, Andy. I mean, when you run the numbers, regardless of what the odds are and perceived value and all that, who's your most likely Cup winner to pull it to be the team that actually catches those outright futures at the end of the year?
Carolina is the most likely winner. I don't think there's value betting on them, down at those prices. I don't think it's been a while since I don't even know like if there has been really any value betting on Carolina to win the Cup at any point this season because they've kind of been, there. Maybe at the start of the season they fell back a little bit, but I mean, like they're likely going to match up against the Rangers, assuming that both of those teams make it out of round one. And even though the Rangers will have home ice, Carolina is probably going to be a favorite in that series. So it's all contingent on them getting out of round one or the Rangers getting out of round one too. But things could really, really jump up if somehow Washington was able to upset New York, which seems pretty unlikely. But that would really, really clear a path for Carolina, and maybe that would mean they were a good bet. But I guess it's all how you handicap that Rangers series when looking ahead to the second round. But for me, yeah, I think it's still going to be a tough road for any of these teams, and I'm definitely against kind of betting on the teams that it's counterintuitive because the teams that I think are most likely to win the Cup are the teams that I'm like least likely to bet on. So I'll probably end up betting on I'll probably end up further down. I've got futures on the Stars from the start of the season at around 15-1. I did have President's Trophy futures on the Rangers and the Stars, so I was happy
Cash the
about the way
Rangers.
that worked out. Yeah, they were 18-1 at one sportsbook prior to the start of the season, and that moved pretty quick. I think they closed around 13 or 14-1 or something like that, which is where I thought they should be. But yeah, so
finding the right team that slept on a little bit is great, and especially at the start of the year, there's a lot of teams. The Jets were one of them that a lot of books weren't really even considering. I mean, I've got a 60-1 preseason Jets Cup future, and even last week, we were looking around and comparing in markets. I mean, the Jets were as low as 10-1 at some other books, and Coolbet still had a 20 up on them. So WSTers hammered that and got in. I think it's now 16 right now, right there with the Leafs. But it's as wide open as I think it's ever been. I mean, you can, as we talked about it before, you can make an argument for literally a dozen teams as to why that they'll be the last team standing. And, it's hard to disagree. It's going to be so much fun, and it gets going tomorrow. Andy, this has been so much fun. Thanks again for doing this. At Digital Gambler on Twitter, and of course, content as well. Fill people in on what you're doing at Canada Sports Betting and how they can get more of what you're cooking.
Yeah, so I host a show on the Canada Sports Betting YouTube channel called The Puck Portfolio weekdays at around 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And I'll be there throughout the NHL playoffs, updating series predictions each and every day. Well, weekdays. So I'll be back on Monday for an update after the weekend. And then over at CanadaSportsBetting.ca, I'll have my playoff series predictions up on a page there that people can check out and whatnot. Writing some stuff over at Oilers Nation, as we're all under the same umbrella now as well. But yeah, no, pretty busy. You can check out. I actually wrote an article recently about how to predict the winner of a 7-game playoff series, and I actually provide some code to run a simulation there with your own kind of predictions and whatnot. So check that out at CanadaSportsBetting.ca. Link in my my Twitter bio.
Beautiful. It's at Digital Gambler. Andy, thanks so much for doing this. Enjoy the playoffs, and catch up on Monday. Talk a little Colorado Winnipeg as things will be underway. Appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, appreciate you, Huss. Go Jets, go.
Good stuff. There is Andy MacNeil. Great to have Andy on the program. And just before we finish up, this is it. This is our last day before the playoffs, lock shoppers. So we go to the Coolbet lines, and let's get the final call for Stanley Cup futures. As we mentioned, that Hurricanes line has gone down. Yesterday or day before, we were looking at 7-1s on the Canes and the Edmonton Oilers. You're getting a better number. If you were late getting in on Edmonton, you still want to have a little action on the home team in Northern Alberta to get the job done. They are at plus 750, and the Carolina Hurricanes plus 670, shortest number on the board. The Florida Panthers and the Dallas Stars are next at 8-1. The New York Rangers and the Colorado Avalanche 9-1. Then the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think this Knights number, if I do recall, was 10 or 11. Listen, the fact that they blew it last night, now have to go through the Central and play the Dallas Stars first, probably has boosted that number a little bit. 12-1 to defend their Stanley Cup championship. The Boston Bruins are 13-1. Vancouver Canucks 15-1. And the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets settled now at 16-1. The Jets number has been fascinating this week. As we mentioned, a lot of us jumped on it at 20-1 earlier this week, far and away the best price on Winnipeg in the market. That then quickly went to 15 the next day, then back to 17, and now settled at 16 right there in a dead heat with the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Tampa Bay Lightning, this one's come down. This was 25-1 yesterday. It is now 22. The Los Angeles Kings, 30-1. The Predators, 40-1. Islanders, 50-1. And funny enough, the Caps now 75-1. Going into that final day of action, the Caps, in fact, were the longest number, including Philly and Pittsburgh and Detroit, 250-1. Not that I would have suggested it, because I don't think they'll be around for a while, but stranger things have happened. You know what goes down in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So There are your final Stanley Cup futures lock shoppers. Jump on over to Coolbet, get on those. Do not forget the 20% win boost on the weekend starts this week. You'll get one NBA or NHL bet per week to add a 20% win boost. So maybe figure out your favorite pick and use it for that. And enjoy the game. So Winnipeg, Colorado, getting going on Sunday. Cannot wait for that one. And of course, Oilers and Kings, round 3, doing it again later on next week. We'll be all over it in the lock shop. Coming up on Winnipeg Sports Talk, we're going to talk more playoffs. Jamie Noodles McLennan's going to be jumping on with us. Ken Weeb as well. And the play-by-play voice of the Avalanche, Connor McGahey. So if you want a lot of Jets Avalanche talk, you'll know where to find us. Otherwise, stick around for more on EST. We'll turn it over to the fellas. They can call a lucky winner for the Vegas trip contest. And programming continues at Edmonton Sports Talk. But have a great weekend. Thanks again to Andy for jumping on today. And good luck with the wagers, lock shoppers, this weekend. We'll see you Monday in the lock shop for more in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
And thanks to Huss right there for handling the lock shop today, as he always does so well. And as he said, Winnipeg Sports Talk getting going in just about 6 minutes' time over on their YouTube chat. So be sure to tune into him. But right now it's time to qualify someone for the EST of Flyaway to Vegas, presented by our partners FlyYEG, the Edmonton International Airport, as well as our partners down in Vegas, the LVCVA. Zach Tim's actually already got someone on the line. Who do we have today, Zach?
We got Scott.
Scott, congratulations. You are now into the mix for this trip to Vegas. Have you been to Vegas before?
I have been a couple times. Looking forward to going back again.
Oh, I like the confidence, feeling that you're going to win next Friday. What's your favorite thing to do when you're on Vegas, and who would you bring with you if you do win?
We like to do a bit of everything. Go to a couple shows, like maybe a surf show, comedy show, do some gambling, swim in the pool, drink a lot of beer.
Perfect. Well, Cirque tickets are part of this. And one more, Oilers, Kings, who wins? Who's moving on to the second round?
Well, I got to say Oilers, of course.
There you go. Well done. Well done. Well, congratulations. You're into the mix. Keep your phone on next Friday, April 26th on the morning show, because if you are the big winner, the boys will give you a call, let you know that you're off to Vegas.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys.
Congrats. Best of luck. And there's Scott, your latest qualifier for the EST Flyway. One more chance today to qualify. That's coming up during the Oil Stream. Myself and Tom Gazzola will be on. That's getting going in about 5 minutes, but around 12:40 or so, we'll do the keyword for the Oil Stream. One more chance this week on Hello Hockey tomorrow at 10 o'clock with Tommy and Sean Bell. And then just 4 days of qualifying next week for the EST of Flyaway. Thanks for tuning in to the Lock Shop this week. Like I said, up next, it's the Oil Stream with myself and Tom Gazzola right here on Edmonton Sports Talk on TuneIn, iHeartRadio, EdmontonSportsTalk.com, as well as those watching on YouTube. That's going to be going in under 5 minutes. Stay tuned for that.